Remember the last time you played a tabletop RPG and your friend cast the fireball spell, killing all the enemies and exploding your whole adventuring party? I know they say that living well is the best revenge. Well, how about you play as a living fireball spell and let revenge be the best revenge with Battlezoo Ancestrary's Year of Titans. Once a month for the next year, you'll receive a unique playable species you won't find anywhere else for your D&D 5th edition or Pathfinder 2e games. Now you can play as a living spell, a skillful cyclops, a wicked troll, or even a mighty kraken. And those are just the ones I can pronounce. An hair jar?
It's pronounced ein hair-jar.
Say tires?
It's satyrs.
Okay, I think I got this one. Dual hand.
Doulahan. It's a headless horseman from Irish folklore, you gigantic tit.
Every month you'll receive a new PDF or Foundry VTT module, along with handmade battle maps, tokens for your virtual tabletop, both static and animated, and detailed in-world lore entries, allowing you to easily add these unique species to your next tabletop session. All this and more for less than a monthly Egg McMuffin. Delicious. Head on over to the link in the description to learn more, because if you sign up for the Kickstarter, you'll get a bonus species a year early, the Mighty Titan. That's 13 unique species throughout 2025 to amaze your friends and family. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to call my dungeon master and tell them that I'm going to be playing as Godzilla from now on. Godzilla.
Oh.
We're live, look at that.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Roll for Combat Live. Today we have a whole bunch of guests for a roundtable discussion / debate about a topic that actually came up. Like, a bunch of YouTubers were like talking and discussing it, and we realized it was just a very lively topic that a lot of people had opinions on, which is, what does it even mean for a tabletop RPG to be indie? What tabletop RPGs in the industry even are indie, or which ones even aren't indie? And what the heck do we call things that are not indie and aren't like D&D? Or maybe Pathfinder, if you put Pathfinder up with D&D, but are kind of in the middle there, if that category exists. And so this led to a big discussion, and credit to Bob Worldbuilder for spurring it on. And there were a lot of other folks who were in there coming up with different definitions. So we want to talk about it live here, and also bring in Steven, who wasn't involved but knows a lot about how those terms were described in video games, and can maybe help shed some light for us on how that would apply to tabletop RPGs from there.
Yeah, so our big tabletop RPG talk, I will bring the video game part to it, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But I actually am I'm probably going to be quiet. I'll do the intro, and then I'll probably be quiet, because I don't play any indie RPGs, except for, if you count Toon, 45 years ago, and Traveler 45 years ago. And I do play DCC, which is indie, and Shadow Dark. So I play that a little, but my weekly games are either Starfinder or Pathfinder, and that's it. So I'm the guy for Pathfinder, or any of those games. But if it's did you play the new Vasset? I'm like, nope. You play Star Trek? Nope. Do you play anything else? Nope. I don't play anything else.
You played a little bit of some indie games when you go to cons.
When I go to cons, I play games. That's actually true. I do play indie games at cons, and that's the only time I play, because no one I know will play indie games. So
see, that's the thing, is because you play 2 indie games, you already play more indie RPGs than 99% of the TTRPG audience. So
fair enough.
That's right.
Fair enough. I also own the rarest indie game probably in the world, which is my sealed copy of Free Market, which was the last one in the warehouse. Yeah, look at it. You guys don't even know what this is. Everyone's like, what?
I have no idea what that is.
Oh, wow! By Luke Crane.
Open it on stream.
No. It's Luke Crane. It's actually supposed to be. It's Derek did a whole video. He actually has another copy, and this thing is. I can't even describe it. It's very famous for being very obtuse and hard to play, and a good concept but a bad game. And I was at Gen Con this year walking around with Ben Milton and Bob Worldbuilder and Grace World Destroyer, and I was walking, and this was the very first day, within an hour, and I saw it on the table. I went, oh my God. And then I just like, I ran and bought, I'm like, how much? And there was $100. They go, yeah, we're cleaning out the warehouse. And this is what we found the last one in existence. And I was like, oh, I bought it. And Derek was furious with me because he had one and he thought he had the last one, but beat him. Anyhow.
So with a lot of these discussions of like what is an X RPG, terminology is key, because you can have people angrily debating, no, this is not a true X, this is not a true OSR, this is not a true indie, this is not a true whatever RPG. And so by having this roundtable, I'm sure we will not resolve this question whatsoever, and it will still be open to discussion and debate by many other people. But at least hopefully we should show everyone who's watching just like how deep the well goes on possible definitions.
Okay. Well, first
Just
of
that
all,
quote, it's the I know it when I see it kind of
Yes.
thing. Like, I feel like it's going to ultimately come down to that.
that
but
was
I'm-
about
it's still
pornography,
interesting.
by the way.
It
It's like,
was.
I don't know what pornography is. I can't
corporal
define it, but I
It's
know it
between
when I
art,
see
yeah.
it.
Yes.
That's what the quote's from.
That is what I eventually came down to thinking was probably going to have to be the definition of indie, because I kind of gave up. But maybe we'll find a definition that won't make me give up on having a single quantitative definition for indie. So let's start with one of them that people were proposing to be like, it's an indie RPG if it has a very, very small team. That was one definition that some people were saying. So you can see Instructive Boy points out an RPG that had a very small team and made a ton of money, though. So what do you all think about the definition that it's an indie RPG as long as it has a very, very small like core team?
Wait, I'll go first, and then everyone else can go, and you can
Yeah,
moderate
yeah.
this. In the video game world, that is considered an indie. An indie in the video game world is considered something that is done by a small team, but a small team, even that's up for discussion, because obviously one person, two people, yes, that's a small team. Is 5 people a small team? Maybe. Could be. Is 10 people a small team? Hard to say, I mean, back in the Atari age and when Activision was around, one person made those games. Like Pac-Man was really made by a very small team, so it's hard to say. What is 50 people a small team, considering some video games now have 500 people on them? Hard to say. Usually it's like one person, yes, that's an indie. 2 or 3 people, it's usually like a small team or a group or family members, like brothers. Like there's 2 brothers who did Dwarf Fortress. Yes, that's considered a small team. I think basically once you get past 5-ish, it starts going a little bit more mainstream indie than indie. So there you go. Yeah, ET was made by one programmer. So there you go.
Are they indie because of, or do they have a small team because they want to be indie, or because they don't have money to hire more people for that team?
Right.
Like, is the idea of indie being, I've got to solve problems on as little budget as possible because we're all like eating ramen and trying to get through this game that we're building, whether that's a video game or a tabletop RPG. So,
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's
No,
a good question. Like, is it so? Is the definition of indie that you're sort of self-publishing it and you don't have financial backing of some form that would make you no longer independent? I suppose if we're going to go for indie as independent, one of the definitions that came up in the discussion before was that like if you can afford to have what you're publishing be a total flop and keep going, maybe that means you're not indie. That was one of the definitions that somebody mentioned. Although Trekeros then said, well, since he was in France, that he could survive a flop because France has a better social support system. So it would mean that indies were defined differently in different countries if you use that particular definition.
I think that it has a little bit more to do with not where the money is coming from, because you can have an indie studio or indie developer that is being supported by an investor. I think it has more to do with where that money goes through. So for me, like as you said, if there is an overseeing entity either within the same company or an entity outside the company, like a publisher, I think that negates it being independent, because it's now being overseen by another group or another group of people that isn't the core design team.
Yeah. Like Sean's doing the kind of thing that I like to do whenever I have trouble defining a term. This always comes up a lot with the term balance in game design, where like it's really, really hard to define what balance is, but it's pretty easy to define what balance isn't, right? Mm-hmm. Like we can figure out like when a game mechanic isn't functioning as it's intended to, et cetera, right? It becomes like the only thing people want to do. These are things that we typically mark as like imbalanced or whatever. So like if we have trouble defining a term or like what a thing is, I try to think of what it isn't. And I think that like, as we were talking about like this conversation, I was like, okay, so what isn't indie would be like, if the company's probably publicly traded, I would say we could probably mark that down as not indie. But even still, I don't think like Paizo's publicly traded.
They are not.
I still wouldn't say that I think Paizo is indie. They have that financial support I think that they've had for a while. And therein it kind of leads me to think, well, maybe it's experience. Maybe it's like a track record of having published this many products, or maybe it's the fact that they have overhead before they go into a project. Maybe, or the amount of overhead, the scale.
So Pathfinder First Edition would be an indie RPG, but now that it's Second Edition, it wouldn't be because they have a track record, like they've been making games.
Like they have distribution, you know? And
yeah.
I think that's one of the hardest things as an indie is distribution. Like
you're not given 50% of your sales to drive through at this point.
Yeah,
right? Different avenue.
Yeah, going through Lulu and still paying the 15%, but you know, whatever. It's not that guy, but
I also think just a singular vision, like like you talk about a team, but as long as the team is like, okay, we're all working on this thing together collaboratively. But I don't know, I keep Googling video game indie terms to try and see a thing, because I was like, wait a minute, I was playing No Man's Sky, and I'm like, is No Man's Sky an indie game? Like, it doesn't feel like an indie game to me, but then you Google it, and it's completely like they pooled their own money, they built the game, they're still self-supporting it. Like, everything about that feels indie, even though I wouldn't look at it and be like, oh yeah, that's a cool indie game. Like, I want my indie games to be weird pixels, just like RPGs, I want my indie games to be like funny things on itch, where I am playing like a version of the Golden Girls, you know, solving murders or something. I don't know.
Well, right. Maybe there's a way to query some of these definitions by using examples of and deciding whether we think that company was indie or not. So, for example, just starting D&D 2014 era D&D team on WoTC, if you ignore the rest of WoTC and Hasbro, was much smaller than Paizo was at that stage of the game. They didn't have very many people on the D&D team. So did having a tiny team there make them indie for that? I think almost no one would say yes.
No.
By Sean's definition, since there was an oversight entity, then that would sort of already determine the fact that it wasn't. But let's think about something else to go with Taryn's definition about an experience. Was Monty Cook Games, right when Monty, not now where it's got lots of people, but right when Monty Cook left and was like, I'm just going to do my own thing. I'm going to publish a few products. Maybe I'll bring in Sean K. Reynolds to write Anger of Angels and a few other friends, Bruce Cordell to write some Psionics or something like that. But that's about it. Was that indie when he first started out? Because he had a lot of years of experience. So with Taryn's definition would say that was not an indie company, even right off the bat.
Yeah, I would kind of put that like asterisk on there, that whenever I mean experience, I just mean like the reputation of the publisher, right? So like Paizo, right? Now, if it's somebody like in the Monty Cook situation, if he goes off and self-publishes his own thing and it's like, you know, it's an industry vet, but it's an indie production, you know?
Yeah, it's like when you're on like a film set and you have somebody who is working on an indie film, but they were also a gaffer on Marvel. Like that's a big sell for those indie productions where they're like, hey, we're bringing somebody in, a lot of industry experience, but they're working on a smaller project.
Or even Scarlett Johansson, I'm going to do this weird indie film because I want to, and it's fun, and they take a huge pay cut to do that indie film. So I think Monte Cook Games, I was thinking of all the different RPG publishers, and Monte Cook feels very indie to me, even now, because I know that they have a lot of products and stuff, but everything is very in-house. Like, they don't outsource to find other writers to make their collections grow. Like, here, we'll pay you 15 cents a word to write this for us. Like, they're all just kind of writing and reaping the benefits of that. And I guess I don't know their businesses completely, but from what I've heard, that's how they operate, and I think that's kind of cool. So
Derek, I put a super chat. Oh, Derek, you'd probably love this topic. I'm gonna have to do this again with the different roundtable. He's not wrong. I think actually his definition is correct. Is that if your primary goal is sales, then you're not indie. If your primary goal is to just get your vision out there, then you are indie. Because then I think about like indie. First, indie, stands for independent. And then I think of indie more from movies than even video games, because the indie movie scene really took off in the 80s and the 90s. There was a very, very big indie movie scene. And mostly it had to do with technology. I mean, that's not true. There was always indie movies, even like in the 40s and 50s and 60s, but they were garbage. It's like they were just absolute garbage. And there actually were, and that was you putting out a movie without the backing of one of the big studios. And I think that's actually where it came from, because there are the big Hollywood studios and there's a set number of them. So if you didn't have a movie coming out with one of those studios, then it was indie. It was an independent feature. And because of technology in the 80s and 90s, you could actually put out movies that competed with big budget movies. I mean, look at, the biggest one that really transformed the indie scene to mainstream was Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs and a few others.
Clerks.
Clerks was Clerks helped Miramax, and Clerks was definitely one of the biggest ones as well, and that was made for like beyond nothing.
Yeah.
Even was it El Mariachi was made for nothing, and that became a huge hit. It's like, so, and that is literally indie movies. But then it's weird because then they become like, well, now Tarantino, he does big budget movies with big budgets and big studios, but he's still considered indie. Wes Anderson, same thing. I'd still consider him indie because he's kind of just does weird projects, even though he has have $50 million against his movies. But they're not made to make money. They're actually made to win awards. Believe it or not, that's what those movies are made for, and also just to get street cred. So we can get into this a lot because those are big established markets, and then we have like our little market of TTRPGs, where if you just come out with something and it's published and people play it, I think that's considered a win.
So here's a weird thought based on Derek's definition for you all. It is arguable based on Derek's definition that maybe, to an extent, Paizo is not indie, while some small one-person things that were put out mostly to make a profit maybe would be not indie. And this is because when Paizo first existed as a separate company that was going to take the Dungeon and Dragon magazine, the reason that happened is that Wizards was canceling the magazines and they were getting rid of some of this stuff. And Lisa Stevens, who was WoTC's like first employee, I think that they hired officially as an employee.
Yes,
she came in. She was very high ranked at WoTC when she left with money that was off of like Pokemon cards and other things that they were doing at WoTC at the time. She easily could have retired and just gone off somewhere and done whatever she wanted to. But she was so passionate about those magazines and those products that instead of just taking her money that was more than enough to retire, she invested and created Paizo because she wanted to put out the product, not because she thought she could get more money that way. So in that extent, at least, you could consider Paizo to be indie by Derek's definition.
I was just going to say, actually, Stephen touched on something there that it touched on something that Jordan also said earlier that I really agree with. And it's the idea that like an indie has a vision, and typically that vision is something of a singular or like small collective, not necessarily like whenever I think of a designer, like if I'm applying for a design role at like Wizards of the Coast, I most likely know that like I'm not producing the game that came from my own vision. I'm contributing to a pool of ideas and how we would engineer this singular brand's like game, right? Like I would be applying knowing that I'm most likely going to be working on 5th edition. Whereas like if I'm doing an indie thing, it's like, well, I had this idea for a thing, I'm trying to get it developed. And I think that vision part of it is like a super important aspect. Because like the more and more I keep thinking about maybe what is or isn't like indie, the more I'm like, okay, well, if I look at like Into the Odd, right? Like this is all Chris McDowell. It may have eventually gotten picked up by Free League, you know, but starting out, this was a vision of one dude, right? Even to this day, it's like he knows all the rules in writing. Okay, like he brought on Johan Noor to be able to do the layout, but like this is one dude, right? That singular, that vision, whether or not it's the quantity of people being a factor making it indie, I think is but I do think that like that's a big part of it is like who has the vision, how involved are they with it, and was that delivered as like maybe it's just literally vision plus small equal I have no idea, right? But
and is that vision trying to what's the target audience for that vision? Because Wizards of the Coast is casting a very wide net. They want everybody to have a place to, you want to do your gothic horror, it's right here. You want to do this, da-da-da. Whereas Arcane Library had a very specific vision. I want to make a game that does this. And there are people that won't like that game, but the people that do like that game are really going to like that game because it's going to do exactly what they're looking for. And there's so many new YouTube channels about RPGs popping up lately. And it always comes back to like, how do you start your channel? And people are like, find a niche within a niche. God. Like, you're like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and this and this. And now I'm thinking the same thing about role-playing games. It's like, I like these type of role-playing games. Okay, well, make it even more narrowed down. You're going to play your gothic horror, but you're actually frogs. Go. Like, and that's an indie game.
To bring in a little bit of like cultural communication theory, I think one of the really interesting things is power distance and how that can affect if something is independent or not. Basically, if somebody who has authority for the product is within the ecosystem of the developers, maybe not a developer themselves, but is like working hand in hand along in the process versus this other entity, a bigger power distance outside of it that somehow has control over it. Like when you sell a product to a distributor and they purchase it, they're purchasing the product and then distributing it, not having oversight on the creation of it. So I think making money on it doesn't necessarily make it, or the intent to make money on it doesn't make it not indie, because I would also look at like YouTubers and be like, we do ad sponsorships, we are looking to make money on that, but I still consider myself an independent creator because I don't have any overarching authority over me.
I think that makes sense. That's kind of similar to, but not exactly the same as the stricter definition that Will from D&D Shorts proposed, which was that it's not independent unless literally all of the creators who are on it sort of are sharing in the success and have the power to make their vision known and to make the changes that they want to make. And I queried him a little bit on that, about whether that even means that you couldn't like hire an artist for a set about to draw the art on the front. And he said he realized he hadn't been thinking of art when he proposed that definition, and that was a good additional can of worms for that definition. But it's related to what you said, Sean, but yours I think is a little looser. So for example, by strictly by Will's definition, you might say that Roll for Combat wasn't indie due to the fact that like Steven and I, our contract, like technically, you know, Steven is in charge, but he's very collaborative and we work together all the time. So by your definition, Sean, he's in the trenches, we're making the decision together, that we would be indie. Whereas by Will's stricter definition, I think we wouldn't be.
Mm-hmm. I would agree there. I think that because there is that closer relationship between the people that are making the product and the people that are benefiting from it or being able to distribute it, I think that does make it more independent. I don't necessarily, because you can hire contractors to do stuff. I've contracted people for videos before, but I would still consider the videos to be independently created.
Yeah, that's like a huge deal. I mean, right now what I'm going through with like, getting Vagabond ready for print is like, I mean, I've put over $20,000 worth of like artwork, like I just into the artwork getting done, right? Like, but it's really important to me that number one, it's made by humans. Number two, it fits the voice of what like I have envisioned, right? But that's another thing, right? Like I have the vision that I'm trying to hire the artist to like match the tone of, so like I all these discussions keep going back to me to like what Jordan was saying, was just like, I think the vision and like nailing that down is where I'm kind of at right now with it. And I see some people in chat that have like what seem more like genre ideas or like what defines a style, not necessarily what defines the quality, I guess, or the what's the method, the ethos, I don't know. I don't really know what this if what we're looking for is like, are all indie games these weird ideas of how to do XYZ thing? Well, I would disagree that like this has to do something other than high fantasy roleplay or fantasy roleplay in general, because Shadow Dark exists or Into the Odd exists. Into the Odd is less elves and dwarves, but it's still fantasy roleplay in some essence. Or are we going to get so strict with the definition that literally the only indie game that matches the definition is like Mouse Ritter or Merkborg, right? Like, so I think like having it loose is nice, and I think like if we get too into the semantics of it, it could just kind of feel like it's going to be nebulous no matter what, and it's going to always wind up with that like I know it when I see a definition,
Well, I'm looking at this. I'm looking at what everyone says, and the one that keeps coming up over and over again is like, who has the control? And that actually is a big part of it too, because I'm thinking of going back to video games. So Dave the Diver came out last year. Dave the Diver, huge hit, great game. And it looks like an indie game, feels like an indie game. It was marketed as an indie game. It wasn't an indie game. It was made by a big company with 50 people, but it definitely was an indie in the sense that it was a division within a larger company that made it. And they had their own control. So it's like, okay, here's a multi-million-dollar video game company, but then here's a small team. You guys do your own thing, and then like see what you make, and then we'll publish it. So they were independent within their own company. So is that an indie game? Because they were able to control it, and they were able to do their vision. So is it not an independent game like D&D? Because D&D, quite frankly, we all know this, it's like what gets written and what gets published is not even close. Like that thing goes through a lot of editing and cutting, and there's a lot of decisions made for marketing reasons that aren't necessarily gaming reasons. So I would say, yes, they're not indie in any way, shape, or form. But then you get Paizo. Now, Paizo, Mark knows because he worked there. He could tell us, like, do things get changed for marketing reasons, or is it changed for space reasons? I know things are changed a lot for space.
Things are changed a ton.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I would say almost never for marketing reasons, but still, there's definitely a locus of control that moves through many different steps, especially from the original writer. And you can have a situation where a decision is made that has gone multiple steps from that writer, where it's just like, yes, during final approvals, this executive said thing X, and that was brought back to the director, who then went to the designer, who actually made 90% of the changes and made sure that they could do that change, but it was probably going to happen. And then the writer was below that. So at the very least, there's a larger number of steps that can happen between things in the extreme cases.
By the way, Sozon85 did a super chat. Said, Indie for me is not able to get it in big box store easily, and it takes a couple of extra steps to get it. Well, not to toot our own horn, but we're Full Combat. We got two people here. We're in big box stores.
Yeah, that was actually a big box store was another definition people had in the discussion, and I pointed out that some of the companies that people in the discussion had said were indie actually had talks with distributors that I happen to know that they were getting into big box stores. I don't know if they're in there yet, because one of the questions was, what do you call something if you've decided it isn't indie, but it's not like D&D size in the TTRPG space? So even D&D size, we kind of just call it D&D or Pathfinder. But could you call it AAA like in video games? Would you call AA anything that's not AAA and anything that's not indie?
Then you have like well, that's a whole lot, right? That becomes this other topic, those,
right? And some people said AAA means it's in my big box store. AA means a hardcover exists at all, and indie means it's only PDF. And then that got into a big debate because there are a lot of very indie people who make hardcover products, or people who might be not independent who are digitally based. And
someone said, by the way, I know Janice, like, oh, you can't see Roll for Combat. Roll for Combat might not be directly, it depends where you live, but if you go to Barnes & Noble and you say, I want to order Battlezoo Bestiary, they will get it for you, because we have distribution with Diamond, and we have distribution with companies that get it to big box.
If you search us on Target or Walmart or Barnes & Noble, at least there's an entry that claims that you can get it.
Right, you can get it. So are we indie? We're two people, right?
Well, I think here it might be worth distinguishing like indie versus third party. Well, at least in this case, because you guys are publishing supplements, not a game, right? So like you guys are publishing supplements for things like Pathfinder, Shadow Dark, and all that. But like insofar as like people that are making a game itself, that like that's the thing that I think I'm trying to look at now, because like if someone says like, well, Cobalt Press would be indie, I'm like, well, I mean, maybe I guess since they're making Tales from the Valiant, but like
it's like that guy who's just that meme where he's like, I guess, like
maybe I don't know, part of me I thought this was funny. I was just like, okay, Mark, does Paizo offer health insurance?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so then they can't be indie. Like maybe that's the killer, right? We're just like, do they provide benefits? Like
that's possible. In which case, then we are indie. I'm not we Paizo, because I'm not a Paizo anymore. But Roll for Combat is indie because there's no benefits.
With
there's benefits,
money though, like
not the same. not those type of benefits.
Yes,
there's other
Thinking
benefits.
Of Dave the Diver,
camera.
Thinking of Dave the Diver, they had carte blanche to kind of build a game. I'm gonna I don't know that for sure, but we'll say like they're like, hey, whatever you guys want to do.
Yeah, more or less.
And so they had money, but that money didn't have influence. And I'm thinking now of the indie tabletop writer, where they're like, hey, I have a vision for this, but my fans don't want it. So if I publish this book, it's not going to do as well because my fans want, I don't know, whatever. So I'm going to actually change my vision to make sure that my consumers enjoy this product more. And then I'm like, does that mean that even though this small team that made Dave the Diver, that's an indie game, but this independently owned game that's kind of like at the whim of their community that they know, will make or break this Kickstarter or this crowdfunding, are they indie? And it's like, I would say no, because they're altering a whole bunch of the stuff they wanted to do in order to make sure that it sells. So
yeah.
I do have one question to pose to the group, because I see a lot of comments in the stream talking about how like companies that are publishing third-party content are considered indie because they don't have direct creative control. For a company that makes stuff for like Dungeons and Dragons with the OGL, being able to create something that fits into the game, is that a form of creative control being expressed on them?
It is. I'll tell you, as somebody who made my revenue these guys did too, right? We were all dependent on the OGL, like for our paycheck, basically. If the fact that Wizards of the Coast pulled the stuff, I guess, wow, it's been 2 years since that happened?
2 years.
It's been 22 months. But yes.
Who's Steven's counting?
Well, boy, my 30s are just flying by. Anyways, so Yeah, no, because you're still working under a license that is exercised. What's the right word here? Controlled, I guess, whatever. By somebody who you are kind of at their whims to. You're third party. Now, like you can still be like again, you can absolutely be working with a license, publishing whatever, and still be indie. Like, okay, right here, Gavin Norman, Old School Essentials, right? Literally, it's like we're talking first edition, cleaned up, better layout, right? Like that is Old School Essentials, but he still has to put the OGL right there at the back of all the books, right? But I still call this an indie endeavor, right? There's still a clear passion to independently produce the books. And I say independently distribute. He's working with Exalted Funeral, right? And like their whole branch is to get indies into more stores, get indies out. Because as much as I've been trying to look at logistics with distribution, I can 100% see why people just go like, "Hey, you put this in your warehouse. I don't ever want to think about how to get it over to Hong Kong." All right, like so it. Yeah, I think this is a thing where it is like it could be nebulous, it could be subjective, where people's lines are drawn as to what is or isn't, Well,
I would say third party is different than indie though, because in that case, Paizo was third party because they were using the OGL and they had a derivative of D&D, which is also why they came out with their revised version of Pathfinder, because they realized, okay, we can't be dependent on anyone. And they literally had to go, break away completely from the OGL and make work. So I think third party is different because, there's actually pretty clear definitions of first, second, and third party. That's actually pretty well defined. Indie is more general. Like there's no good definition for indie. By the way, we missed one super chat, which is
we did from Derek.
Yeah,
but it's definitely true that you can be on a third party license and still be indie. Taryn, you gave the example of Old School Essentials. Derek said indie games can be traditional high fantasy, but then you get auto written off as a fantasy heartbreaker.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what he's saying there, but
he's talking about the indie game that looks like it's trying to dethrone D&D at being a D&D.
Oh, I see.
And so those are called fantasy heartbreakers because it always breaks your heart when it does not do that thing.
Okay. Well, would Avatar: The Last Airbender be considered? Well,
it would not. It would not be considered a fantasy heartbreaker.
No, not a heartbreaker. Sure, no, that thing brought in 12 mil?
Yeah, it brought in 10 mil, but no one plays it.
And it was not trying to be a D&D.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. But no one plays it. It sold a ton. It's one of those weird things. We call those collectibles. It was like everyone bought it and they collected it and no one plays it. They just put it on the shelf.
Avatar?
No, go to any. But I'm talking about if you go to game conventions, there's very few tables of Avatar.
Maybe, but like I do feel like I see Avatar getting at least whenever I go to like Twitch. If I go and look at like the tabletop roleplay channel, I feel like I could. I'm just gonna see. I don't know. A shot in the dark here. If it would be on there, I do think that it gets play. It's probably what I would say is one of the most popular Powered by the Apocalypse adaptations. At the very least. And that honestly, that whole series is so popular. There's definitely tables that are playing it.
So Taryn, one thing I've learned from being with Steven on these for the past 22 months plus is that when Steven says everyone is playing thing X, that means like a pretty good number of people playing it. When he says no one is playing it, what he really means is compared to how well it sold or how popular it seemed to be, a lot fewer people are playing it.
You're correct. Mark is 100% correct. Well, considering how well
these extreme hyperbole.
Well, no,
but for the hyperbole here, then nobody
percentage-wise,
plays it.
well, percentage-wise, because then you look at like Shadow Dark. I mean, so the company that runs Shadow Dark at conventions runs my games, so I know how well they do. Okay, I'm talking to the same guy. Like, they literally can't run enough tables. Like, the Shadow Dark sell out insanely fast, immediately, and no matter how many tables they add, they keep selling out. And that, as opposed to, like, I was looking at Avatar games at Gen Con, and there was very few, so that's what I mean. It's like, comparatively, that thing sold, was the biggest Kickstarter of all time at the time for a tabletop game, and yet it's not, you don't see, like, you would think there'd be 1,000 tables of it, or a whole room filled with it. Nothing. It's a couple independent people running it on their own, and that's it. So.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't propose that bet because I looked at Twitch and nobody was playing Avatar. So
You see, it's not her problem. I'm not exaggerating.
And
no one's playing it.
Someone on chat said that a Gamehole con, which is like not the biggest con of all time, it's a fairly sizable con that had a bunch of systems, that there were actually 0 registered games of Avatar there.
Nobody. See? 0 equals no one.
I did see 2 streams of Simbarum, which was cool. But,
But no, seriously, like, okay, that thing made $10 million. Okay, until Brandon Sanderson, it was the #1 TTRPG ever in history. You would think one person is playing it. Okay, one. You would think there'd be.
I think we've established that Avatar fans don't like Twitch. That's what it is.
That could be
there
it.
You go.
Yep. Jordan,
you could be right, because, like, you look at it works the opposite. Like, one of the most popular shows in the country is Yellowstone. Look up how many people talk about Yellowstone on Twitch, or sorry, YouTube. No one talks about Yellowstone. Like, you don't see any of these. Like, no one talks about it. But
Not
it is
yet.
one of that some people are starting to, because now it's like its 6th, 7th season. There's
we're
a million.
We're going to get a Frontier Scum actual play going on, partner, all right?
But just because it's popular doesn't mean, popularity and being in zeitgeist and being part of social culture is not the same. It's just not. So.
I do have a question for the group. Who here has played Avatar Legends?
I did. Yay, I played
it
it
as well. It was the first non-D&D game I ever ran.
Wow.
Okay.
And so I ran it for my friends. We had a really cool, awesome first session. Then we did like a short campaign. Haven't touched it since, because it's like hitting a brick wall for some of the rulings in it and some of the rules. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I need clarification. And there's not a community online to clarify. It's very like, it's like block text on Reddit that doesn't really give you an answer. So that's why I stopped playing it, because it's really hard to get into unless you really have Powered by the Apocalypse down, which I didn't at the time.
I think that's the big deal with that one, is that Powered by the Apocalypse is like, I almost think that PBTA kind of requires a bit of like foreknowledge for some people about like, here's what you're supposed to do in a role-playing game. And like PBTA is another step in the more like, actions are going to be more nebulous. The rules are a bit more freeform. And as such, I have my whole bookshelf over here that I reference constantly. I probably have read over 60 different TTRPGs at this point. PBTA is the one system that I keep looking at that I'm like, I still have no idea what's going on. But like, it's very hackable. It fits so many genres. I get why people do it. But yeah, I keep constantly feeling like if I was going to roll up a PBTA thing, it was like, I need to know what this does. Not like if you use this action, or sorry, this move over here, well, that's different from your move, which is like your speed. That's different from, it feels like there's not enough, what Ked was in the chat earlier, almost like there's not enough G in the RPG. Like I kind of want more meat to the, I need the points to make the brain feel like good stuff is happening.
Yeah. Well, we would call those those are called collectibles. So back in the days of DVDs, I don't know if you were one of those people, but people, especially when they were cheap, especially when they were like, you go to Best Buy and just buy them, you would see, I had friends like this, tons of friends like this. You would go into their house and they would have 300 DVDs of all their favorite movies, and I'd be like, have you ever watched any of these? And they're like, no. They literally just don't buy them. They just buy them because it makes them feel good, and it's a
collector aspect of it, yeah.
Right.
Like,
it makes them feel
I have
good.
the complete Frasier.
Right.
All whatever seasons of
Hey,
it.
dude, I watch Frasier every single night on Cozy TV.
I'm not trashing it. I'm just saying there are people that have those DVDs and they're not
Right.
holding them down all the time
Right.
to watch like their favorite episode of Frasier.
Right, but it's very rare, and people would buy it because it shows like they like to be connected to it. It's like, oh, cool, that's a connection, and that's what, like with the Avatar. I feel like the Avatar was like, oh, cool, a game about Avatar. It's got these cool dice and cool pictures, and they buy it and they put it on the shelf. It's like the people who buy Monopoly and buy the Simpsons Monopoly or Lord of the Rings Monopoly. They will never play that game. They just put it on the shelf.
Sean, you played Avatar Legends.
Yep.
I played Avatar.
Yeah. Who here has it but has not played it?
I don't have it.
My hand is up.
I do not
I
have it.
have not played it.
And but Sean, are you an Avatar fan? Like, are you a big Avatar fan?
So that's the funny thing. When I started running this, I hadn't even seen the third season. I gave up on season 2.
What made you want to run it and buy it and play it?
It was on the shelf at my favorite bookstore, and I wanted to get into a new TTRPG, and I was like,
okay,
I know all my friends love it, so I bought it and ran it for them. But for me personally, like, I had seen a lot of Avatar as a kid, but I had never finished it, so I had to go through and finish it before I ran it.
Because I feel like that's like Star Wars games. Like you people would make a Star Wars RPG, and I think it would sell very, very well. But I don't know how many people are actively playing Star Wars RPGs. Because it is one of those, like, I just want this book on my shelf. Like, there you go.
Guarantee
Well,
that's
I
a
bought
big
the
part of
PDF,
it.
so maybe I'm especially weird. But in my case, I saw it on a really good sale, and I know, like, my nephew is too young to play Powered by the Apocalypse for all the reasons people have been talking about here. But, you know, he really loves Avatar: The Last Airbender, and maybe in a few years, if he still really loves it, I have the PDF, which I bought on a huge sale. So I'm more like the people who buy the DVD because they really think they're going to watch it, even though they don't.
They will never watch it.
What?
Ever. You'll never watch it.
And maybe I will never play Avatar: The Last Airbender, but I do have it.
Not only did I play it, I have never seen an episode of my entire life. I knew nothing about it. And the only reason I played is because we were at Origins and Derek was running it. And then I played the Budgetar. I was an airbender, but I can only bend one thing. So I was not the Avatar, I was the Budgetar. And I had a fantastic time. And I will never play it again. I have watched the show on Netflix, so now I know what's going on. But
Okay, I was like, yeah, if you still haven't seen Avatar, that's like one of my 10 out of 10 cartoons. It's so good.
I could not I know everyone tells me I cannot get into it. I know it starts off really.
The beginning is bad.
So babyish. I can't take it. I can't.
Man, I feel like Avatar just doesn't have. I don't want to make this an Avatar thing. Never mind.
But
I know. I've heard.
I like the show.
I heard it gets good.
I'm the one who showed my nephew the show, but the beginning is bad, and the episode where it turns out that they're playing soccer is the worst episode in the show.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that was interesting because I got into the show a lot later than I would have because my two younger brothers were like, "You should watch this show. It looks like it's for kids, but I think you'll like it too." And then they turned on Nickelodeon at the time when it was just coming out, and it was that soccer one. And I watched it. I was like, "This is awful. I'm never going to watch this again." And then many years later, I did watch it. I was like, wow, that was just legitimately the worst episode in the entire show. And by the way, my brothers were like, no, Mark, no, this was just the worst episode in the show. This is not representative. I'm like, Occam's razor says, what are the chances that I turned on the worst episode in the entire show? I don't think so, but it was.
Yeah, that's like the I've got like an 80-page rule with books. Whenever I'm like reading any like novel, I've got so many books now that I'm like, if by within the first 80 pages I'm not immediately thirsting to like go to the next like 120 or whatever, I DNR it. I just put it on my shelf and DNF. There we go. Did not finish. Not DNF. Yeah. Do not
resuscitate.
Never mind. Yeah. It just sits on my shelf and I'm like, oh, okay. Well, like there was that.
Oh man, I'm so old. I got to the point that I'm now just rereading books that I haven't read in like 20 or 30 years because I forgot everything about them. So I know for a fact I'm going to like them because I like them. And it's like if I were me, would I like this book? And I realize, yes, I did like this book when I was me 20 years ago. Therefore, I will reread it now, and I remember nothing about it. So it's like I'm rereading it for the first time. So.
That did just bring up like an interesting question I had. At least it's interesting to me. I don't know. It could be absolutely, yeah. I think the company that like kind of is the line here for me is Free League.
I was thinking about that, like this Free League, because Free League, they're pretty big and they have
IPs
money
like crazy.
Yeah,
they take other smaller independent companies and they do like some of the publisher stuff for them. Right.
Yeah.
So they're kind of become like the power locus that Sean was talking about.
They're not indie. Like they're not. See, I wouldn't say. I'd say they're not indie. Paizo's not indie. I'm more interested in like the mediums. Okay, is Goodman
So
Games?
what do we call the mediums,
is,
Steven? What can we call them?
I'll get to that. It's Goodman Games. I don't think they're indie anymore either. I mean, yeah, they have their own game, but they have hundreds and hundreds of products. They have big box representation. They have multiple employees.
They have a vision. Like they're not going to make DCC Alien, like really good, but they are like, hey, we want to make DCC Dying Earth or DCC, like they're like, we're going to stay in this area. But yeah, I would agree. I don't think they're indie anymore.
They're not.
I think
they used to be, but not anymore. What about Cobalt? Cobalt has a lot of employees now.
I don't know about Cobalt Press.
Cobalt?
Like Wolfgang is mostly operating he's like CEO, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So like, I mean, I think they're like, they have distribution.
They do. They have like 8 or 9 full-time employees. They were one of the biggest full-time employers for all TTRPGers out there.
Which, if you're watching this and you think, wow, 8 or 9 makes you one of the biggest, the answer is
that's huge.
Yeah, it's huge.
Try to find a full-time position in the tabletop RPG industry because there are not very many that exist.
Yeah. No, they're probably one of the biggest. So they're not. I don't say that. I'd say Cobalt's not anymore.
MCDM?
No, they have full-time employees too, and they're in a weird spot because they haven't put anything out really. I mean, I think
that's why that's interesting. Like so far, they've put out 5 ebooks,
right? And they had Arcana magazine, but that's gone. So what are they?
They brought in $4 million on an idea. I think it's pretty fair to say like they're a production studio at this point, And I mean, the vision, like, I guess if MCDM was just Matt Colville, it's one thing, but it's James Introcaso and Sadie Lowry and Hannah Rose. So like they're a revenue generator.
Ghostfire Gaming.
I think they're kind of down to just like 3 employees now. Ghostfire
is one of those weird. They're bigger than they appear. They're not as big as you think they are.
They do a lot of contract work.
Mm-hmm.
They hire a lot of freelancers.
Well, I don't know if I would call that because I have like 50 freelancers going in at any one time. Most of them are artists, but we have like half a dozen writers going on right now. Like we have a lot of freelancers. So, I don't know if that counts.
And going back to the indie movie, like I might hire a lot of freelancers to hold boom mics and do things on my movie.
Yeah.
Is it still indie? Yeah, because it's me. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, a game is not a movie. And so I think that's why we're having this discussion too.
Well, right.
Like, what does it mean to be indie? And what is that mid-tier?
Well, that's
like, you're not quite a Hasbro, but you're not quite an itch.io kind of, I drew this on a napkin and I made a game. So,
by the way, that's what you call them, Mark. I think they're called mid-tier.
Mid-tier?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a very sensible...
Hashtag, I coined it. TM.
You did it, Jordan. That's the most like...
I'm registering the domain right now.
Go right there.
Mid-tier
the T is silent. What? No,
no, there was a
mid-tier.
Mid-tier.
PH. It's spelled MIPHD here.
Yeah.
Mid-tier. The PH is silent. What?
Yeah. It's okay. Nobody knows what it means. Just go with it.
Well, that's the only way you could be able to get that domain if you put a PH in there. So, no, that's what they'd be called. You'd call them mid-tier, but that's a standard term. Like, it's like if you're not indie, you're not mainstream, mid-tier. So,
do you have a trademark? Maybe. Like that's
trademarks are easy.
Yeah.
I mean, I have trademarks, I have registrations. I don't think I would call it that. That's like
even an indie company might take a trademark out to
easy.
try to protect their thing.
Well, really the big difference. So I'll tell you the big difference. And I've talked about this a lot, actually with Professor Dungeon Master. Is that if you listen to When We Were Wizards, has anyone listened to that podcast?
I haven't yet. Everybody's recommended it to me, but
oh my god, what is wrong with all you
especially
people?
with
It is
my
so
Greyhawk
good.
videos, I need to listen to it.
Oh no. When We Are Wizards, you have to. It's so freaking good. Well, the biggest thing you listen to when you hear about it, and I remember because I'm old, is that back then, when you were making something like a book, you needed like a dozen people working for you. You needed someone to write it. You needed someone to do the layout. You needed someone to literally put it on poster board and then bring it to the printer. It was like this huge process. You needed secretaries. You needed offices. It was like, you just needed dozens and dozens of people. And nowadays, I mean, it's kind of insane. It's like, it's me and Mark, and we do everything. It's like we do all the writing, all the editing, all the layout. I send my files to printers overseas. They print it. I have warehouses. They go to the warehouse. I have distribution. It's like it's all done because of technology. Technology has changed everything. That's something that used to take 50 people to do back in the TSR days is now done by 1 or 2 people. Like Kelsey Dion, she has her. That's it. She's made a huge number of books. It's just her. She barely even has anyone even working with her. She has very few artists. She does the layout herself. She does everything herself. You couldn't do that. It was impossible to do that 30, 40 years ago. Literally, you couldn't do it. You needed a small team. Like first you needed a big team, then you needed a small team. Now you need one person and one person. Yeah. I mean, Indestructible, you're doing your thing pretty much all yourself, right? You're Vagabond.
Yeah. I'm hiring artists and everything, but like that does touch on a point where like there's a really interesting thing that art movement that went through an indie like phase was music, right? And part of the reason why we had the indie phase was because it got easier to
back in the 90s
make records yourself, right?
Yeah.
And mass
I could record without a big studio. Yeah.
That's completely right. You're able to, or you could even rent studios. I was working in MTV back then when the whole indie movement came out, and I remember that they would go, you'd rent studios, you'd be able to put out a tape, you'd be able to do it yourself, and then with like the advent of Napster and online. I mean, that's
distribute it easier.
Yeah, you just distribute. You don't need distributors anymore, and that's
that's kind of what I think is like the means of production got easier.
Right.
I guess yay.
You can shoot movies on your iPhone now.
Yes.
Because independent people were able to get the tools to do professional production easier.
Yeah.
With Adobe, we have InDesign now. Well, I'm using the same software that they use to lay out the D&D books. So
yeah, it's exactly the same.
I could get on a phone call.
The Napster callback and chat.
Yeah.
Well,
dating herself.
That's what had happened. I remember.
We all know LimeWire is where it was really at, though.
Yeah.
Fair share.
Well, no, because what's happened is it's always disruption. Is that you have Napster came in, and I remember it. I was right there. It's like all these people were like trying to justify their existence, and a lot of their existence in the publishing industry for music was there because you needed to physically make things to get them into stores. And now you can get around them, and they all went out of business and they were all fired because you didn't need them. You just didn't need them. And that is actually starting to happen. You're seeing it in real time with movies. Movies are going through the same thing right now. It's a bloodbath in Hollywood. And because you just need a lot less people to make movies because the technology has gotten so much better that you don't need as many people. What's making that different is that they have extremely strong unions in Hollywood, and they're very powerful. So that is a real fight, and you've seen that fight. You've seen the strikes. Like, that's what it's all about, is that they're literally hiring less people because they don't need as many people, and a lot of them are just sitting around. So they're like, okay, yes, the contract says we need to hire 5 people, but we only need 1, so we're only going to hire 1, things like that. And that's just going to keep happening. It's like, in every industry. It's happening in video games. It's starting to happen again right now in video games.
Book novels too. Like how many people have self-published a novel?
Yeah.
Like,
it's starting to happen with
Is
books.
that just the future? Like
Yes.
I mean, back in the day, it was like, man, I really hope that when I audition for these movies, I can someday become an actor and I'll work. Or it's like, I really hope that I keep writing all these things so I can get picked up by a book publisher so I can write a bunch of books.
Yeah, well, that's
and
gone.
nowadays, is it going to be like, well, I guess I'll just write that cool book I have and self-publish it and hopefully retain all the rights. Just like I'm going to make that CD, I'm going to make that game.
Yeah.
And that's indie. And that's cool.
That's
Go
indie,
out, make your thing. Do it.
Well, Silo, which is now a show on Apple TV, that was self-published by like one guy. And that's now on Apple TV up to the 2nd season, So you see, that's what's interesting about publishing, because publishing is done by one person, almost always, or 2 people. So the only way you can get your books out is that you had to go through these publishing houses who had the distribution methods to get your books printed and then sent out. And there was this huge structure for it. And now that's going even, it's not dead yet, but it's dying. It's that, well, you don't need that anymore. You can go on from Fiverr and find an editor for you, if you want. And some of them aren't that bad. You could actually find people that will professionally edit it for you. You self-publish it on your own on Amazon. And if it does well, there's a lot of books on there that do very well that are self-published. And what you lose in sales, like you might not get as many sales, but you're giving so much money to the publisher that you're getting it all back. So even if you get 1/5 the sales that you would have gotten if you went through someone else, you're still making the same amount of money, if not more money. And you have complete control. You own it 100%, so you don't have to worry about any of that. So
well, yeah, and you can't guarantee that you would have otherwise made that money anyways. So like
So maybe that's it. It's just that the technology. Now I'm starting to think about it. I'm thinking that's it, because the one thing I'm seeing in common with all these indie publishers is technology. So the indie scene in movies started because it got cheaper and easier, and video, that's actually where it started. The invent of video made it that people can now shoot movies like Clerks, which was done on video, and many of these other movies that were all done on videotape, like Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which was another big one at the time. And so they can now make these movies that are very cheap, because it was very expensive to make and develop film. It's incredibly expensive. But videotape, hey, it's really cheap. So then that started that revolution. Same thing with the music in the 90s. Music got really cheap and a lot easier to do, and you had things like GarageBand and all these other things that Apple was coming out with, and Adobe, and suddenly indie music was becoming on the scene. Now we have publishing tools that are really cheap, so now there's a lot of self-published books out there, and people like us that are doing indie. So I think that might be the definition of when indie when indie becomes truly indie, is that you have the tools and the means to publish your vision without having to compromise by having to give a portion of your proceeds or your idea to anyone else. You could do it all yourself. Okay, we finished. We're done. Okay, there we go.
I like that, because like it doesn't rely on a numerical thing. It's not saying like only one person can do this, only 5 people can be on the team. I'm like, no, I'm interested to see what 100-person indie project would be. I'm sure it would be too many cooks in the kitchen, but like, that's
Yeah, I think it couldn't make it to 100 just because when you are trying to make everyone a collaborator, then each time you add another person, it is creating a quadratic number of links between people that are necessary for that. So by 100, you would have ballooned out the communication to an impossible degree if everyone truly was part of the vision.
Do you ever have you ever watched like Reddit Place?
No.
Okay, so every like 3 years, Reddit has this big community project. It's called Place, and you're restricted. Like there's this big like art board, and everybody gets to place a pixel in there.
Oh, like the flag.
Yeah.
I just didn't know that's what it was called.
Yeah, it's our place. But you can only place one pixel every like 5 minutes or something
I've seen
like that.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it would turn into. It's just like, oh, okay, well, we want this game to be like, it's a, I don't know why I thought One Piece immediately. It's gonna be a One Piece game, and then like somebody else is like, yeah, but I want it to be Batman, and it's
Okay.
so many pixels.
Wait,
yeah,
you
Or
just
Twitch played Pokemon where they were just wandering around forever.
okay. Wait, let's talk back up. Let's talk indie. One Piece, like one of the top 5 most profitable franchises in the history of the world ever. That's by one guy.
yeah, but that's just part of like the manga industry. Like, I mean,
did it start indie? Like
It still is. It's still
Goodman
one
Games
guy.
started indie.
Yeah, but it's still one guy. He hasn't. He does it all himself. Like, yes, he
doesn't cast the live TV show and have
He
and
was-
direct all the actors and
no,
stuff.
but he was
That's
Voice
not
all
him
the
doing it by
voices.
himself.
No.
It's expanded.
right, but he still does the manga and the story, and he actually was heavily involved with the TV show, which is why it came out so fantastic. So
I bet he didn't do the 4Kids English translation though.
Yeah.
no, but I'm talking about
He might not have
actually.
been happy if he was.
I'm
so
talking about
heavily
the
involved.
original manga. That still
They were
is just him.
compartmentalizing One Piece. Like, oh, just the manga is indie. Like, I don't know. Like, if you're thinking One Piece as a big brand, like I'm thinking of Goodman Games and DCC as a big brand,
Right.
then it's no longer indie. But it started, like, One Piece started indie, but I think it's very big, and there are lots of people who are like, hey, we'll make more money if we can do this, and they're asking the creator, and he might have some influence in it, but at the end of the day, like, there's still there's people knocking at his door like, hey, can we make One Piece Monopoly, please? Like, we'll sell a lot of money. And he'll be like, yeah, but I want the colors to be like this. Oh, okay, sure, whatever, but we're still gonna make it.
Yeah. But that's still, but that still counts as being indie, because like if he has like a brand book and he says, okay, and which I guarantee he does, it's like, okay, you can get it. And this is very common when you work with big brands. It's that I would work with big brands all the time. They'd give you these brand books, and some of these books could be hundreds of pages that say, okay, this is how you need to use every piece of our brand. And you can't do this with it. You can't do this. You can't do this. Like Disney has that. Everyone has that. And this is how they're able to have hundreds of people or thousands of people represent a brand and have it seem coherent and actually part of the same universe, and it doesn't turn into a
Can that really
mess.
be indie though? Can that really still be indie, or is that just a bigger thing that grew larger than the initial indie vision into a shared
Terrence
universe?
dying.
Yeah. Oh, I got it.
Yeah, okay.
It is. It started as remember, I'm going to use some keywords from this. It started as the vision of a single creator.
Correct.
And then it eventually started paying for the health insurance of a bunch of people. That's when it didn't become indie. We fixed it. We figured it out. That's the equation.
Where does dental come in?
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's
Well, they're in
serialized.
Japan, so I think they have universal health care, so it's a little different.
Using the example of Oda, the creator of One Piece, what about Brandon Sanderson and Dragonsteel and Tor Books? Like it's all him doing it, but then he's going through Tor Publishing. They have a tabletop role-playing game being developed by Brotherwise. Where does the line get drawn between indie project or vast?
So for Brandon Sanderson, I think his passion and stuff is to making books and publishing his books, and not necessarily making this game. It would be the same thing of One Piece, the RPG. Like, his focus is the story of One Piece, not branching out into other mediums. So I would say that it's not indie, because it's like, this is a very established thing, and we're now hiring people to branch it out and make it into some kind of an empire. Critical Role, not indie. Like,
that Critical Role is super not indie. They have a huge
were
team.
they indie though? Like back in the day? Like,
never.
hey, we got a little podcast.
Not
It's just
really.
us. We're
Not
really
really.
cool.
Not really.
Like, oh.
They were like,
I guess they're not publishing, but yeah.
they were
Like,
sort of indie.
can an actual play podcast be indie? There you go.
I like what
Yeah, I think
Sketchosaurus
so.
said.
Yeah.
I like what Sketchosaurus said, because I think it gives you a moment where an indie thing becomes non-indie. He says, One Piece is not indie. Oda is the writer and the main artist. It's a Jump production. Well, if we backtrack that a little bit, at one point it did not have a production group.
Correct.
Same thing with Critical Role, I would say. If they were like an actual play that was just Matt Mercer and his buddies, that's one thing. But they had Geek and Sundry from the get-go.
But also Oda is the writer, and you know what? He's the right. He's like, oh, it's not indie. Oda's only the writer and the main artist, and the one who came up with the entire universe and all the characters and everything in it. Maybe, but like it's his vision, and I think that's okay. Look at Star Wars. Star Wars is a perfect example of like Star Wars. You can actually see what happens if you take something that was the vision of one person and then turn it into a corporate identity and try to do the same thing, and it fails spectacularly in every way possible.
To be fair, even when it was the vision of George Lucas, you can't quite say that episodes 1, 2, and 3 were the greatest of all time.
No, but episodes 4, 5, and 6 were beyond indie. It was considered the indie film. They didn't use Union. Okay, that is beyond. That was the indie movie. That and Jaws are considered completely indie because they did not. They went outside the studio system when they made those movies, and they actually were. The studios were pissed when they made those movies. Did he get fined
for that?
Yes.
Has he paid that yet?
Yeah, he got fined. Yeah, they got in a lot of trouble. You can look it up. They all went outside the studio system. And back in the 70s, like they break your legs for that sort of stuff. You know, I mean, it's a little different now. No, seriously. I mean, it's like they would just, corner you in the alley and beat you up and say, okay, you're going to be using contract and union guys. So
did they send an actor to break your legs? That'd be just like have Cameron Diaz show up at your doorstep with a pipe wrench.
No, but there's a reason why he didn't shoot any of it in the United States.
Well, there you go.
Well, I'm not kidding. It's like there's reasons why he went to other countries to shoot these things. So
they should bring an actor who's known for roles playing like a mafioso or something like that.
No, damn it.
Robert De Niro.
Yeah.
Alec Baldwin, who's actually shot someone. Like, hey, whoa.
Get Al Pacino to do it.
He was clear to that. Clear with prejudice against the prosecution, no less, which never happens. That's how bad that was for them. Anyhow.
He's 10 the Karate Kid. I like that.
Yeah. Return of the Jedi was filmed in Cali because by 1983 he changed the whole system, and then they started to realize, oh crap, this guy is like, it's like, oh well, let's see, the most popular, profitable movie in history. Maybe we should play ball with this guy, and that's right. They were able to start filming that, but I think it was still, it wasn't union. None of those were. So. Anyhow.
Taryn brings up a really good point about Critical Role and Geek and Sundry. Does it have to be a legal oversight of a company that makes it not indie? Because Geek and Sundry never owned Critical Role. Critical Role has always been owned by Matt Mercer and that group. And that is why they were able to split away from the LDN so easily. So does it have to be legally a legal authority over them? Or can it just be like, maybe that's the distributor because that's the channel that they were on.
Yeah, well, right. They were contract. That's something.
Well, she's been Felicia Day. She was actually on the early Critical Roles, if you remember, and supposedly they had an amicable split. But who's really still pissed about that is Will Wheaton. Yeah, Will Wheaton's not happy, and I don't know what's going on. There's some behind the scenes because I think he felt like she got left out of all that money, and there's something going on there. But you're right, that is a weird part. And Geek and Sundry was originally spun off by Google, so is that indie? I mean, it's all over the place. I don't know. It's a big mess. How about that? So.
But I kind of think that it's been easier now that we've sort of figured out what the means of production are to make a book and produce it at scale, and now that we have crowdfunding at our at Access, it's not just the software and the production that's a lot easier. It's also the manufacturing and the distribution that we're now able to easily handle to make the indie thing work, right? It is a thing that can get distributed. Whether or not it's in a store is one thing, but at least you're able to get it out to the world by some means, right? I think that's the cool thing to me.
Do you have to go through professional routes in order to make the product? And I don't. I can make a movie on my phone. I can I can make a game in my basement. I can print it. Back in the day, they were photocopying zines to do the same thing, and it was indie. Nowadays, it's subscribe to my email newsletter, jorfton.com.
Is that indie? Is your newsletter
It's
indie?
good business. So,
And I realized that Mark said that we were going to debate earlier, and like no one's gotten mad enough. So I think Sean needs to throw a chair or something. Like,
I think that this has been a debate in the sense that there's some things that people didn't agree on some of the definitions with, but we're just very civil in the way we do a debate, and I like that. That's the kind of debate I prefer to the like clickbaity, angry, chair throwing, stomping off the screen debates.
You know, Mark, I disagree.
All right. Well, now that's it. I'm just gonna leave this stream.
Oh,
yeah, Mark Thaco was actually right. Okay.
I like that
we
guy.
gotta go back.
Honestly, compared to before they had Thaco was an improvement.
I like that
That's
a
only
lot.
because what they had before was even worse. In terms of
whoever
making
says
it
I
easy
like
to
Thaco a
understand.
lot, one more time, I swear to God.
Well, the main reason, I'm going to tell you why, and there's actually a very simple reason, is that there's more. Well, it's not a tangent. It's that more video games were made using second edition rules than probably any other edition. So I got extremely used to it. And Thaco works really well as a video game. I don't know how well it worked as an actual role-playing game, but it works really well as a video game. So there you go.
Well, anything, Steven, anything that's clunky to describe to a human being can still work fine as a video game when it's in the background.
Correct.
Right?
Well, I didn't say I didn't say it was.
That doesn't mean it's a good design. That just means that computers didn't pay attention to the bad parts about it.
Hey man, but I played thousands of hours of second edition D&D on video games, and I have played maybe a dozen hours of second edition D&D in person. So I, again, am very biased, but it works really, really well. All those Baldur Gates
you
and
played so few hours of second edition in person. Was that during like a gap
in
your gameplay
I
when
was in
you were
college.
working too hard?
I was in college.
Oh, okay.
And we, it came out when I was in college, and like we were just into other things back then. So
Fair enough.
The second edition came out while you were in college. Why would you admit to that, Steven?
what do you mean?
No.
I'm not young. Nothing I can do about it.
He earlier said in this episode the famous quote, "I know because I am old."
I'm
Oh, there you
old,
go.
man. What can I do? I can't fight it other than just keep. Hey, man, I still play games, and we were talking about that. I'm actually the youngest one in our group, and we were talking about that. It's like we used to joke all the time. We're like, oh, when we retire, we're gonna all go to the homes in Florida, and we're all gonna play games all day while we're sitting around. And we're like, so when are we all moving to Florida? Like when are we all going to the home? Because we're all gonna play there. Because we're getting close. Now we're just doing it online. So there you go.
Yeah.
It's not that I'm proud to be old. It's that it's because Professor Dutchmaster and I are within like a month of the same age. So he and I and we're both from New York, so we have a lot of the same similar backgrounds, and we grew up in the same area. So we talk a lot about this. But like we were there. Like we saw this all. It was very fascinating to see it, but we were kids when it happened. Like you go to like Gary Con, and those are the people who actually did it. Like they were the ones working in the industry, but we were the kids of the 80s that were living it and like grew up. And like during, they talk about like, oh, the Satanic Panic. It's like, I remember the Satanic Panic, and it was real, man. They were putting kindergartens in jail. Okay, lots of them, because they thought they were teaching Satan worshiping in kindergarten. So they were taking 80 and 60-year-old women and throwing them in jail. Okay.
Oh, you said kindergarten teachers, not kindergartners.
No, kindergarten
right?
teachers. I'm like,
Okay, right.
what the hell,
He
man?
actually,
I thought you said
technically said that
kindergartners.
they're
No.
putting kindergartens in jail.
Kindergarten teachers. But that's the part of the Satanic Panic you never hear about. Like, they talk about the gaming part, but that was the other half. The flip coin was that they were also talking about, they were teaching, there's, I guess, I don't know where that one came from. It's like they were literally teaching worshiping Satan in kindergartens. I think because that was the first time that they were sending. It was like when they started to have two family homes where both parents were working, and that only really started around the 80s. And so you would have to send your kids to school in kindergarten and nursery school, and it was the beginning of like before you sent your kids to first grade. So they felt like, I don't know, it was something to do with that, and they're like, oh, our kids are getting brainwashed, and they're teaching them Satan worship, and it was a big deal. There was like 60 minutes on this freaking thing, and people went to jail. Like, how do you prove that? How do you prove, oh yeah, I was teaching worshiping Satan to 5-year-olds? It's crazy.
So to summarize Steven's monologue, do not quote the deep magic to me, which I was there when it was written.
Pretty much. We were there. I remember it all. It was fun. It was fun. It was a great time. That was the best time to be a kid in the 80s. I'd hate to be a kid now. It's terrible. I tell my kids that all the time. I'm like, boy, I'm glad I'm not you. Sure would suck.
You don't want to watch the skibbity toilet videos all day?
No, my kids, I'm proud of my kids. They mostly travel, actually. My daughter is like, she went to Amsterdam. She's in Switzerland. She just went to Finland. She's in Norway. She's in Copenhagen right now studying. Actually, that's where I'm going. In 2 days, I'm going to Copenhagen to go visit her. So I will not be here. That's where I'm spending my Thanksgiving. In Copenhagen, Prague, and Germany. So there we go. That's where I'm going.
Well, I'm jealous.
Yeah, I've never been to any of those, so I'll find out. I try to have my kids travel and like live as opposed to glued to screens. I mean, you're not going to get away from that, but by actually having them do real experiences, that's what I try to do. So I try to balance it with my kids. So I tried to get him into gaming. I tried to get him into TV, into like science fiction. I was like Star Trek, wouldn't get into that. Harry Potter. They actually do like Harry Potter. Harry Potter they like. But we are seeing Wicked. Mark knows that. Huge Broadway fans. Like I see every Broadway show. So seeing Wicked tomorrow. I'm seeing Wicked with my son. And I spoke to my daughter. She's like, oh, I'm seeing it too. I'm like, in Denmark? In Copenhagen? You're seeing it? She goes, yeah. I was like, okay. Guess it came out there
And
too.
you're not talking about the movie. You're going to go see the Broadway show?
No, I've seen the Broadway show like 4 times. No, I've seen the movie. So it's my son's favorite Broadway show, like, of all time. So he's dying to go see it. He's been following the movie forever. So there you go. Now we're up to the movie part, Mark. It always turns into movies eventually.
We've made it to the movie part. That means that we have probably exhausted the main topic.
Did we agree on an exact definition? Have we solved?
I think we actually solved it better than before.
I think we did.
The idea of having your own independent vision that is not beholden to somebody else who can come in and change it.
No, I think it really is that technology has gotten when technology gets to the point that you can independently, without being beholden to anyone else, to have your vision given out to the masses, that you can be considered, quote, indie.
I'm just trying to see how many I can get on camera to expose to the audience to go check these cool ones out and all that. Yeah, I honestly think the coolest stuff right now that's happening in the TTRPG industry is kind of happening in the like indie scene right now. Like, I think Jordan said this in one of my videos. I love the hacker space that you were talking about, kind of going on with like the indie scene, where it seems like there's a lot of people that are united around the basic expert like damage structure, and everyone's like we like writing stuff in like this. I don't know. It's not so locked in on specific pulp fantasy. Like I can go and pick up a game that's like liminal horror, but it still uses basic expert, like, you know, damage structure. People know what they mean by like as leather armor, like, you know. Yeah, I just think there's a really fun space happening over there. Yeah.
By the way, there's exactly 100 people on, which is a decent amount. But if you go to battlezoo.com right now, I started Turkey Day early So we actually started Black Friday today because everyone's doing it. I've noticed that everyone does Black Friday. Now it starts 2 weeks before Black Friday.
It's creeping up. Eventually, it's just going to be Black November.
You know what? I was talking to some of my agency friends, and they're like, "Oh yeah, Black Friday started last week." I'm like, "What?" They're like, "Oh yeah, it's that's when it starts." I was like, "Okay." So I started it early, and sure enough, I'm starting to see that. So you get 25%, almost everything. Believe it or not. Not someone wrote me. They're like, "Oh, Secret Dragons isn't 25% off." I'm like, "It's not even out yet." Okay, I hate to break it in. I'm not doing the new stuff. I'm like, anything that's
Besides,
not
your
out.
ad didn't say it was 25% off of everything.
It doesn't say
25. It says 25% off of many products.
Many products. I know.
It is
I'm like,
many.
dude, relax. I'm not giving. It's brand new. It's not even out yet. Okay, something that's 2 years old, fine. You can get that 25% off. So. People
I swear,
really
every time I've like come on here, I've seen you and Mark. You guys are such an odd couple. Like,
really?
It's just it's so funny to see. Yeah.
How are we odd?
No, the odd couple.
Oh,
like
we are. Like the odd couple. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Yeah, but that's fine. We are.
It works. It works. It's a good dynamic.
Well, Mark
You
is
know
the
what?
straight
It
man.
covers the different spheres of influence and stuff that you have to do as a publisher between the two of us. Steven can be out there using his hyperbole to market and get things done in that sphere, while I can be like typing things up and trying to get everything super precise for the like the writing and the game design.
Yeah, who's Felix and who's Oscar? Easy. Mark's Felix. I'm Oscar. That's like a no-brainer. He's Mr. Fussy, and I am not. I'm not fussy. Which is only so funny because it's so not. Mark and I work together. That is so not true. He and I are very exact. I'm so exact when it comes to layout and design and writing. It's the marketing part of me that gets a little like exaggerated.
Yes, we're both kind of Felix-ish in certain ways, but the marketing Steven is Oscar.
Oh yeah. Oh, Mark is operation. I'm sales. Yeah, I'm totally sales. That's what I do though. I've always been part of sales. I mean, I'm a big part of sales. By the way, speaking of sales, look at this. Look what came in, Mark.
Yeah, you showed it to me, I think maybe on the last episode.
No, this just came in today.
Really?
Yeah.
Then how is this different than the one that you
That
showed
was just
me
the
recently?
cover. That was without the book.
Oh, it was just the cover.
This is the book.
Is real.
This is the real
this
thing.
Is gorgeous. I definitely want my special edition Calazandrax.
Well, you don't get it.
Dragon book. Oh, I don't get it.
No, even though you wrote it. Sorry.
I literally wrote the entire book, Steve.
I know you wrote every part of this book, but you don't get. Look at that!
Okay.
Look how good he came out. I had to print this just for
Now
you,
you're
Mark.
just taunting me,
I had to print this 3 different times to get the color right, because printing on black is a pain in the ass. So. By the way, as I found out the hard way. So, when's your book coming out, Taryn? Every time I look, I'm like, I see you working on it.
Yeah, we're looking at Q2 2025. I'm getting in so Vagabond's doing late pledges right now over on GameFound. Steven, I'll get you the check. Cool. We're doing late pledges right now over on GameFound. Right now we're just wrapping up some final playtest and getting art in, and that's kind of about it. Looking at doing print and fulfillment in most likely April, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, it's now I can see why people go with we need a logistics guy. We need a marketing guy. After this year, I'm so ready to hire out other people to be like, no, you talk to the fulfillment group. I'm good. I'm just gonna write. Like,
yeah.
Steven always talks to people, and he's like, "You guys, you need a logistics and a marketing person. You don't think that you do, but you're gonna get in trouble."
yeah.
Well, logistics that has
for
to,
sure.
yeah, that you can't do. Like that is because people are like, "Where's my stuff? Where's my stuff?" Sometimes, and I'm like, "Here's the warehouse. Talk to them." I'm like,
Yeah.
I have nothing to do with that. So, they're in charge of all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That stuff you don't want to deal with, period.
Yep. I'm like, I'm going to get those guys. Those guys are going to have a palette. You all talk to them. And
yeah, there's a couple of... marketing's a little different. I still do the marketing. I would like to outsource it, but it's hard.
Yeah. And expensive.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's not worth it. The problem is what you'll pay in marketing you won't make back, so there's no point in doing it. So it's a catch-22.
Always the... Yeah. Jordan, what are you working on, man? What do you got coming up?
Oh, geez. Well, I got a bunch of RPGs from Exalted Funeral recently, so I'll be doing some reviews on my Jocular Junction channel, which is we're at like 9,000 subs on that channel. It's on YouTube here, and it's just non D&D stuff. And I am finishing up all of the Dying Earth Dungeon Crawl Classics modules, so I'm going to be doing some reviews on those. And then for the main channel, I'm doing some Greyhawk videos now that the 2024 DMG is out. I don't know anything about the world of Greyhawk, so it's been kind of fun to read that, especially Living Greyhawk, which was a really interesting 2000 kind of thing where different factions from the world were vying for control. I don't know, it's kind of cool. But as an indie RPG person, I'm trying to make a D6 system called Modular D6, and I've been playtesting it with friends and stuff, and so that's on itch, and it's going under many revisions here and there as I keep experimenting and learning. It's like an excuse to learn layout software and stuff too, so I've been playing around with that. And I bought a Wacom draw thing for the computer, so I'm going to see about doing some like stick figure art. It could be like fun. So
Nice.
I don't know. I'm just like playing around, learning new stuff.
What about you, Sean?
I'm gonna make a video someday. Right now, I'm like sub 30 days from graduating with my degree, so I'm just trying to cross that finish line before I get into anything else. But I have a lot of ideas. Oh, thank you so much. I'm freaking out a little bit at the end of the line, but I already got a job with the university, so it's pretty good so far. But yeah, I have like 4 or 5 scripts, the really interesting topics too, and I just haven't had the time to go through and make those videos. But so that's where I am right now.
What are these scripts you speak of?
I gotta talk to you about how you make your microphone sound like NPR, man. Like that. Oh yeah, it's like it's got that woodsy sort of NPR.
We all know when Sean's
resonance.
talking. Like
yeah.
Today on Dinner with Sean.
Yeah.
Welcome back to 20 minutes.
Yeah.
That's all the time I got.
Wow, I got the reverb and everything.
Yeah.
It's a serious mic. Well, we still got our Year of Titans going on, our Kickstarter, and that is... Oh, I even got a fake book. Look, it's the Year of Titans. Look, this is what you can't get.
Yes.
You will get this, but it's
totally
all
fake.
It's totally... You will get this, but all digital. So there you go.
And the content will be the actual Year of Titans content and not the fake stuff that's in this book.
Hey, man. It's all sales, man. You ever got
what is in that book? Now I'm curious.
It's the 2 years before
it's the year
creatures from the Year of Monsters.
It's the Year of Monsters. It's the Year of Monsters book.
That's
See?
the dungeon.
That's the dungeon you can play.
Is a character who's a giant tree dungeon.
You can play
their
a dungeon.
character.
Yeah, we got. I do that all the time. Is I'll make fake books and then send them out. So I just took the inside. But yes, it's. But yes, you can play a Titan. You can play an ogre. You can play all these fun things.
Living Spell.
That's. I'm very curious to see when that one's written. That one, everyone's. Oh man, you could play Magic Missile. You can play Fireball. You're like. I can't wait. I mean, I've got the art. The art's pretty interesting. They're all color coded for your convenience. I don't know if that means. In fact, there's one right up there in the upper right hand corner next to you, Mark, is that's a living spell right there.
That's true. I've got a living spell up next to me who is, I think, a bard who is like a living spell of some kind of musical occult magic.
And there's actually a new bogey next to Sean that just came in. I put a bogey there. There's a
Oh
bogey.
yeah, there is a new bogey down there. I hadn't seen that one.
Yeah, it just
That's a
came
cool
in.
one.
It just came
And
in.
then we've got a Dullahan in between the two.
It's a Dullahan. So, yes. But you can go pledge now for that. And our Misfits Dragons came out yesterday for 5e and last week for Pathfinder. So you can play crazy. I like Misfits because that's the
Their
one I
magic
came
is
up.
out of control.
They're
the
literally-
Bionic Dragon's necromantic magic is eating their bodies, so they're replacing it with robot parts. The Metamorphic Dragon's transformations are just randomly changing them. The Doom Dragons are getting divination visions that they can't even control, that are always negative and like they sometimes right, sometimes wrong. Phase Dragons phasing in and out of existence, and Wellspring Dragons doing random wild magic all the time. So.
Well, Wellspring Dragons are the Red Mage. So if you like the Red Mages, you want to play a Red Mage as a dragon, there you go.
Wait,
so-
they're the Red Mage?
Well, yeah. What was in? Oh, sorry, Wild
Final
Mage.
Fantasy?
Wild Mage.
They're
Wild
the
Mage.
Wild Mage,
I
not
meant Wild
Red
Mage. Wild Mage.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know why I
Okay.
said Red Mage. Wild Mage. Yeah, they're the Wild Mage of D&D, which is pretty much what they are. So they
Plus, there's a new D100 Wild
D100
Magic table.
table. You can roll, see what happens. Who the heck knows? It's like I cast a spell, doesn't work. Up. Let's roll. So you see, we got a
He even
little.
wanted some art recently, and I was like, "Do a wild magic." He's like, "Which ones?" I was like, "I'll roll the D100 table."
I put some
We can
more
just
in
put
there.
that in the art.
I actually have the one where I got to think a better one where the wave appears out of nowhere and just like crashes into you. So I think that would be fun because then you have like one of the dragons getting crushed by the wave and the other one's
I
diving
like
out of the
that
way.
one. There's lots of good wild magic effects,
There's one where you get a spotlight and you're like an actor on the stage, like out of nowhere.
and it
So,
changes the colors and based on the mood of what you're doing at the time.
yeah. Of all the things we've done, that's my favorite because we are inventing new dragons all the time. We just keep inventing new dragons because why not?
Never
Why not?
stop dragoning.
Never stop dragoning. Well, yeah, I always thought about it. Like, why are there only this many dragons? There's only 39 real core dragons, and that's it. We know because we counted them all and put them in our book. And then we had to invent 5 more and then 1 more to make it 45. And then I'm like, screw it, just keep going. So we're just keep going, invent 20 new dragons, and they got more after that. We got, if this does well, which has done very well, we'll do another book, and we got more dragons coming after that. So. See, we do derivative stuff, but we do cool derivative stuff. So
Hey,
It's
being
also
derivative is fun.
integrated, and when you integrate a derivative, you get the original function.
there you go. See, that's what Mark brings. He brings the geek. I bring the sundry. He brings the geek. There we go. So
I think we made it through the topic, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We actually figured out a definition, which I didn't necessarily expect that we'd be able to do. And I guess until next time, if you want to battle the zoo, you have to roll for combat. We might be off next week for Thanksgiving, though.
that's right. I won't be here. So unless Mark gets
I
Excited.
probably won't be available either.
he probably won't be excited. He probably won't be around. So you guys are on your own next week.
Aaron and I will hijack the channel. And
Yeah.
do
There you go.
I'd be
Stereo on stream.
happy to give it to you. I have no problem. If you guys want to take over 1 week, we'll get Jess on there, the true owner of RFC. I have no problem with
According
that.
to her
What's-
meme from some of her other episodes, and just put in people, and neither of us is on there. And just
Yeah.
you do whatever you want that week. It'll be hilarious.
That
We'll
would
just take
be great.
We'll take random links from chat and just show them on screen.
Sure.
We don't know. We won't screen them or anything. you know?
What
no
is
problem.
OnlyFans?
Yeah.
I
What?
don't-
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, no.
Yeah, but you got to, you know what? If you want, go right ahead. You know, you as long as it's actually it doesn't matter. There's nothing I can say. All right, yeah, go right ahead. Have some fun. Otherwise, I will see you guys all next week. Maybe these guys will be here next week too. Who knows? Find out.